The Alaskan wilderness is brutal, untouched, and indifferent. In this vast, unforgiving landscape, a grizzly bear mother stands alone in the middle of a frozen clearing, her massive frame tense, her dark eyes locked onto something or someone. She is not running. She is not attacking. Instead, she does something unthinkable. She takes a step forward, then another, and then she looks directly at a man, pleading. Wild bears do not ask for help. Yet here she was, a creature of pure instinct, leading him somewhere. But where she took him, no one could have predicted, and what he found there would change everything. The forest was silent, swallowed in the thick embrace of early winter. Snow clung to the trees, heavy and wet, muffling the usual sounds of wildlife. The wind had died down, leaving only an eerie stillness, as if the entire wilderness was holding its breath. Luke Harrison adjusted his rifle strap, shifting the weight of his gear as he trudged through the underbrush. He wasn't here to hunt, he never hunted predators, but out in these woods, anything could happen, and being unarmed wasn't an option. His cabin was miles behind him, nestled at the edge of a valley that stretched endlessly. He had been out here since sunrise, tracking a herd of elk, hoping to bring down just one for the harsh months ahead. But the deeper he went, the more he felt it, something was wrong. The birds had stopped singing. The usual rustling in the brush, gone. Even the wind, which had howled through the trees all morning, had vanished into an unnatural quiet. Then he saw her, a massive brown bear, standing motionless in the middle of the frozen clearing. Luke's breath hitched. Bears didn't do this. They didn't stand out in the open, exposed in broad daylight. They didn't just stare. His fingers twitched toward the rifle strap, but he didn't raise it. Something felt off. She wasn't standing tall to threaten him. She wasn't lowering her head to charge. She just stood there. Luke swallowed hard, his pulse hammering in his ears. He knew these creatures well enough to understand that this wasn't normal. Her fur was ruffled, streaked with dirt and ice. Her shoulders heaved with deep, heavy breaths. But it was her eyes that stopped him, cold, wet, wide, brimming with something almost human. And then she moved, not toward him, not away. She turned, walking toward the tree line, then stopped, looked back, and waited. Luke's stomach twisted. Bears didn't wait. Bears didn't ask. And yet, this one was. His instincts screamed at him to turn back, to leave. But something else, something deeper, held him in place. She took another few steps, stopped, turned, waited. And this time, Luke took a step forward. Then another. The bear moved again. So did he. They crossed the clearing in near silence, a man following a bear into the unknown. The trees swallowed them, the forest growing darker as the branches intertwined above, blocking out the light. Luke's boots crunched over the frost-covered ground, but the bear moved soundlessly, effortlessly. She knew where she was going. And for some reason, she wanted him to follow. The further they went, the more Luke felt it, something was waiting ahead. A smell hit him first, rot, blood, decay. His stomach clenched as the stench grew stronger. Something was dead. The bear pressed forward, her breaths heavier now, more urgent. A few steps later, Luke saw it, a dark shape slumped against the base of a tree, barely visible through the tangled brush. His hands instinctively went to his rifle as he stepped forward, eyes scanning for movement. But nothing moved. Nothing was moving anymore. His breath fogged in the air as he crouched low, pushing aside the brittle branches, and then his heart stopped. It was another bear. Smaller. Lifeless. A cub. Luke's chest tightened as the reality hit him. The mother hadn't been acting strangely. She hadn't been looking for trouble. She had been asking for help. Luke let out a slow breath, his throat tightening as he turned his gaze back to the mother. She stood a few feet away, her massive frame still, her eyes locked onto his. And in that moment, he understood this wasn't just a mother bear mourning her cub. This was something else. Something he wasn't ready for. The forest swallowed them whole. Luke Harrison followed the massive brown bear, his heart pounding with every step. The weight of his rifle against his shoulder was reassuring, but he didn't reach for it. Not yet. The mother bear moved with purpose, her heavy paws pressing into the snow, leaving deep imprints in the frozen ground. Her breaths were labored, her broad shoulders rising and falling with each step. She never turned completely to look at him, but he knew she was aware of him. She wanted him here. The thought sent a shiver through his spine. Bears didn't do this. They didn't lead humans through the woods. They didn't seek them out. And they certainly didn't trust them. But here he was, following. The air was thick with the scent of decay now, sharp, overwhelming, cutting through the cold like a knife. Luke swallowed against the rising nausea in his stomach. Something wasn't right. A dead cub wasn't uncommon, harsh winters, starvation, territorial fights. These things happened in the wild. But the way this mother bear had found him, the way she had looked at him, the way she had waited, it felt wrong. His grip tightened around the strap of his rifle as they reached a clearing. The moment he stepped forward, the bear stopped. Her massive body blocked the entrance to a thicket of tangled branches. Her ears twitched. Her nose lifted toward the air. And for the first time since she had found him, she turned fully toward Luke. Her eyes were dark, glassy, pleading. And then she stepped aside. She was letting him pass. Luke's pulse thundered in his ears as he cautiously stepped forward. His boots crunched over the frozen leaves, his breath visible in the icy air. And then he saw it, a second cub. Alive. But barely. The small, trembling figure lay curled at the base of a fallen tree, its fur wet, clumped with patches of ice. Its tiny ribs pressed against its skin, rising and falling in weak, uneven breaths. Luke dropped to his knees, his breath hitching. The cub was dying. Its mother, this massive predator, this creature that should have ripped him apart for being near her young, had led him here for a reason. She was asking him for something no wild animal had ever asked for before, help. Luke's fingers hovered just inches from the cub's frail body, his mind racing. This wasn't just a matter of survival, it was a matter of trust. The mother bear trusted him. She had waited for him. She had guided him here. She had chosen him. But if he moved too fast, if she changed her mind, he wouldn't have time to react. The mother huffed softly behind him, a deep, guttural sound that rumbled through his chest. He turned slightly, his eyes meeting hers again. She was waiting, and Luke had to decide. His hands were steady as he unzipped his jacket, moving with careful, deliberate slowness. He could feel the mother bear watching, her muscles tensed, her weight shifting slightly, but she didn't move closer. She was letting him. With painstaking caution, he reached forward and touched the cub. The tiny body flinched at the contact. It wasn't dead, not yet. Luke pressed his palm against its chest, feeling the faint but struggling heartbeat. This cub had hours left, maybe less. He couldn't leave it here, he wouldn't. With slow, careful movements, he wrapped his jacket around the cub, shielding it from the wind. It barely stirred, its small body too weak to fight. And then, as he lifted it, the mother bear let out a deep, guttural exhale, not a warning, not a growl, something else, something that felt like relief. Luke held the cub against his chest, its small, fragile body barely warming against his skin. He could feel its faint breath, the slow rise and fall of its tiny ribs. It wasn't safe yet. He took a step back, then another, watching the mother bear carefully. She didn't lunge. She didn't bare her teeth. She just watched. And then, as if she understood, she let out a low breath sound, turned her massive body, and disappeared into the trees. Luke stood frozen in place. She was leaving. After all of this, after tracking him down, after breaking every instinct in her body to trust him, she was walking away. She had done what she could. Now it was his turn. Luke took one last breath, tightened his grip on the cub, and ran. The wind was sharper now, the snow coming down harder as Luke pushed through the trees, his boots crunching over ice and brittle branches. His cabin was miles away, and every step he took felt too slow. The cub barely moved. Its breathing was shallow, weaker than before. He couldn't let it slip away. He wouldn't. His lungs burned as he pushed forward, his arms wrapped tightly around the tiny life he was now responsible for. The forest stretched endlessly before him, the sky darkening overhead, and behind him, somewhere deep in the wilderness, a mother bear walked alone, trusting that a man she should have feared would do the right thing. The wind cut like a blade. Luke Harrison pushed forward, his boots crunching through the snow, his breath coming in ragged bursts. The tiny brown bear cub was wrapped tightly in his jacket, pressed against his chest, its fragile body barely warming against his own. It was so small, so weak. Each step through the thick forest felt like a battle against time, against the cold, against death itself. He didn't know why the mother had chosen him. He didn't know why she had trusted him, but she had. And now, this cub's life was in his hands. Luke's cabin was still miles away. The cold gnawed at his fingers, even through his gloves, and the weight of exhaustion pressed against his muscles like iron chains, but he couldn't stop. The cub barely moved. It was too still. Luke clenched his jaw, pressing his palm against the tiny chest beneath the layers of fabric. He felt it, the faint, unsteady rhythm of a heartbeat. Still alive, but fading. He adjusted his grip, holding the cub closer. "Stay with me, little guy," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper over the howling wind. The snow was getting thicker now, falling in heavy sheets, turning the forest into a maze of white. His visibility was shrinking. His body was screaming for rest, but he couldn't stop, not when every second mattered. Not when this cub had already been given a second chance. Luke's mind kept flashing back to the moment in the clearing, the way the mother bear had looked at him, the trust in her eyes, the silent plea. She could have attacked him. She could have ripped him apart for getting close to her cub, but instead, she had stepped back. She had let him take her baby. She had trusted him to do what she couldn't. The thought tightened in his chest like a vice. Luke had always believed in respecting nature, but this wasn't just nature. This was a mother's love, a bond so strong that she had risked everything, her instincts, her fear, the balance of the wild, for a chance to save her child. Luke swallowed hard, his throat dry despite the cold. He would not let her down. After what felt like hours, his cabin finally came into view, a small structure tucked between towering pines. Smoke still curled from the chimney from that morning's fire. Relief surged through him, but he didn't slow down. he shoved the door open with his shoulder, snow spilling in as he rushed inside. The warmth hit him instantly, the air thick with the scent of burnt wood and pine. He didn't hesitate. He knelt near the fireplace, carefully unwrapping the cub from his jacket. For a terrifying moment, it didn't move. Panic rose in Luke's chest. Then a small shudder, a breath. Its tiny body quivered, reacting to the sudden change in temperature. Luke exhaled a shaky breath. Not gone yet, but he had to be careful. Too much heat too fast could be just as dangerous as the cold. Luke moved quickly. He grabbed a thick blanket, wrapping the cub carefully before setting a warm, not hot, bottle of water near its body. He had seen enough hypothermic animals to know that warming them too quickly could send them into shock. The cub let out a weak, pitiful whimper. Luke's chest ached at the sound. "You're okay," he murmured, brushing a careful hand over the cub's head. "You're safe now." The cub didn't respond. Its body was still too weak, but it was alive, and right now, that was enough. Luke didn't move from the cub's side. Hours passed. The storm outside raged on, the wind battering against the cabin walls. The world outside was reduced to a blinding swirl of white. Inside, the fire crackled softly, the only sound besides the cub's slow, uneven breathing. Luke sat cross-legged on the floor, watching, waiting. At some point, he reached for a cup of coffee, but he never drank it. He was too focused. Every so often, the cub would stir, or just barely. Its tiny paws twitched in its sleep, its ears flicking at sounds it couldn't quite understand. Luke exhaled slowly. It was fighting, and so was he. Luke's fingers brushed against the cub's fur, and suddenly, a memory surfaced, a different winter, a different life. Luke's father had been the kind of man who believed in letting nature take its course. If an animal was weak, it wasn't meant to survive. Luke had never agreed. He had been 8 when he found a dying fox in the woods, its small body curled against the roots of a tree, its breath shallow. He had begged his father to help him save it, but his father had refused. So Luke had stayed with the fox all night, wrapping it in his own coat, trying to warm it with his hands. It had died by morning. He had buried it himself. That night, he had promised himself something: if he ever had the chance to help again, he wouldn't fail. Luke let out a slow breath, looking down at the cub in front of him. This time, he wouldn't fail. As dawn began creeping over the horizon, Luke felt it, a shift, a change. The cub stirred, then its eyes fluttered open, dark and glossy, filled with confusion and fear. Luke's heart pounded. It was awake. It was alive. He swallowed, keeping his voice low. "Hey there, little one," he murmured. "You made it." The cub blinked slowly, then, for the first time, it let out a sound, a soft, trembling cry. Luke's throat tightened. It wasn't over yet, but for the first time since that mother bear had led him through the woods, he let himself believe that maybe this cub had a chance. The morning light seeped through the frost-covered windows, casting a pale glow over the cabin's wooden floor. Luke hadn't slept. His body was stiff, his eyes dry, but he hadn't moved from the cub's side. The fire had died down to glowing embers, and the storm outside had passed, leaving an unsettling quiet in its wake. The tiny brown bear cub lay curled in the thick blanket near the hearth, its fur still damp but no longer ice-cold. It had survived the night. Barely. Luke exhaled slowly, watching as the cub's small chest rose and fell in slow, uneven breaths. It had opened its eyes once just before dawn, dark, glassy, filled with confusion and exhaustion, but now it was still again, its body too weak to do anything more. It needed food. That thought brought a new wave of urgency, cutting through the exhaustion in Luke's mind. He stood, stretching out his aching legs, and moved toward the small kitchen area. The cabin was stocked for the winter, but feeding a bear cub wasn't exactly something he had planned for. He rummaged through supplies, his hands landing on a can of evaporated milk. It wasn't perfect, but it would have to do. Luke worked quickly, warming the milk and diluting it with water, knowing that anything too rich could make the cub even sicker. He found a small cloth, rolled it up, and dipped it into the warm liquid before kneeling beside the cub again. "Come on, little one," he murmured. He pressed the dampened cloth gently against the cub's lips, letting a few drops soak onto its tongue. At first, nothing happened. Then the smallest twitch of movement, a weak flick of the tongue. Luke's heart pounded. It was responding. He squeezed another drop onto the cloth, letting it touch the cub's mouth again. This time, it latched on, sucking faintly, its tiny body trembling with the effort. It wasn't much, but it was something. "You're a fighter," Luke muttered, his voice low and steady. "Just like your mother." At that thought, his stomach twisted. The mother bear, she had led him to this cub, had risked everything, her instincts, her fear, the laws of the wild, to place her trust in him. But what happened to her after she disappeared into the forest? Had she gone back to the clearing? Had she found the body of her other cub, the one that hadn't survived? Was she still out there, wandering, searching, waiting? Luke clenched his jaw, shaking the thought from his head. He had to focus on the cub in front of him. One step at a time. The feeding was slow, agonizingly slow, but little by little, the cub took more. By the time it finally stopped, its breathing had deepened slightly, no longer as shallow as before. It was still weak, still dangerously fragile, but Luke could see it, a flicker of fight, and that was enough. He sat back against the wooden wall of the cabin, rubbing a hand over his face. His muscles ached from the tension of the last 24 hours, but the exhaustion didn't feel as heavy now. The cub was alive. For now, that was all that mattered. But the moment his body finally relaxed, a sound outside made him freeze, a low, deep rumble. Luke's eyes snapped toward the window. The cub stirred weakly in its blanket, letting out a soft whimper. Then another sound, a guttural, aching growl. Luke knew that sound. Slowly, carefully, he stood, moving toward the door. His heartbeat thundered in his ears as he pressed his palm against the rough wood, straining to hear past the thick silence of the snow-covered world outside. Nothing. Then, as he reached for the latch, a shadow moved beyond the frost-covered glass. Big. Slow. Waiting. Luke's breath caught in his throat. She had come back. The mother bear was here. The world outside the cabin was still, but Luke could feel it, the weight of something enormous just beyond the door. His breath came slow and steady, every muscle in his body tense as he carefully unlatched the lock. The wooden door creaked open, revealing a world blanketed in fresh snow, and there she was. The mother bear stood just feet away, her massive body partially shrouded in mist, her dark fur dusted with frost. The morning light filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the clearing. Her eyes, deep and unwavering, locked onto his. She didn't charge. She didn't growl. She simply stood there, her breath heavy in the icy air, her chest rising and falling with slow, deliberate movements. Luke's pulse thundered in his ears. She had come back for him. For the cub. He wasn't sure, but he knew one thing, he couldn't move too fast. His grip tightened around the door frame as he stepped out slowly, boots crunching against the packed snow. His movements were measured, deliberate. The bear didn't flinch, didn't retreat. She was waiting. The silence between them stretched heavy and unspoken. Luke could feel the cold biting into his skin, but he didn't care. This moment mattered. The cub whimpered softly inside the cabin. The mother's ears twitched, her nostrils flaring as she sniffed the air, her weight shifting forward slightly. Luke's chest tightened. She knew. She knew her baby was alive. His voice came out lower than he expected, steady but quiet. "He's here." The bear didn't react. Luke took another step forward, then stopped, gauging her response. She held her ground, eyes locked onto him, but there was no aggression in her stance. He could see it now, the exhaustion, the weight of grief still clinging to her massive frame. She had lost a cub. She had done something no wild bear should ever do. She had sought help from a human. And now she had returned for what? Luke swallowed hard, then took a slow, deliberate step backward toward the cabin. The bear's head tilted slightly, tracking his movement. Another whimper came from inside. Luke reached the doorway, his heart hammering as he stepped inside just enough to see the cub still curled in its blanket. Its tiny body barely moved, but it was breathing, that was all that mattered. He exhaled slowly. Now came the impossible part. The mother bear had trusted him once, would she trust him again? He crouched down, carefully gathering the cub into his arms, mindful of its fragile frame. It barely stirred. His entire body was tense as he turned back toward the door, his arms wrapped securely around the tiny bundle of fur. The mother bear's breath came heavier now, her ears pricked forward, her massive paws pressing deeper into the snow as she took a single step closer. Luke forced himself to stay calm, to trust the moment. With painstaking slowness, he moved forward, one step, then another. The bear huffed, her muscles tensing. Luke's hands tightened around the cub instinctively. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and this could all end badly. But she didn't lunge. She didn't back away. She waited. Luke took another step, then, standing just 5 feet apart, he did something that every survival instinct in his body screamed against. He knelt. The mother bear let out a deep, guttural sound, somewhere between a growl and a whimper. Luke carefully, painstakingly, lowered the cub into the snow. The tiny creature didn't react at first. Then, after a long, frozen moment, it moved, a weak, unsteady twitch of its paw, a barely audible whimper. The mother bear stepped forward. Luke held his breath. She closed the distance between them in a single, fluid motion. Her massive frame towered over him, her breath warm and heavy in the icy air. Every nerve in Luke's body screamed for him to move, but he didn't. Because for the first time since this had all begun, he wasn't afraid. The bear sniffed the cub, nudging it with her massive snout, a soft, almost tender touch. Then another sound, a deep, heartbreaking rumble. It wasn't a growl, it was something else, something that felt like relief. Luke swallowed hard, his throat tight. She had come back. She had trusted him. And now, she had her baby again. But she didn't leave. For a long, frozen moment, she just stood there, looking at him as if she understood. Then slowly, she bent down, grasping the cub gently in her jaws. Luke exhaled, his breath shaking. The mother bear turned, her massive paws pressing into the snow as she carried her cub back toward the trees. Luke watched, unable to move, as she disappeared into the forest. The silence that followed was deafening. His body felt like it was made of stone, his heartbeat a distant thunder in his ears. Then, finally, he stood, and for the first time since that mother bear had led him into the woods, he let himself believe he had done the right thing. The forest felt different now. Luke stood at the edge of the clearing, his breath slow, watching the last traces of the mother bear disappear into the trees. The air was thick with silence, as if the world itself had paused to acknowledge what had just happened. His fingers were stiff from the cold, his legs weak from exhaustion, but he didn't move. He just stood there, letting it all sink in. She had taken her cub. She had trusted him, and now she was gone. The reality of it pressed against his chest like a weight he couldn't quite shake. Everything about this moment defied logic. Bears didn't ask for help. They didn't trust humans. They didn't come back after walking away. And yet, this one had. She had stood in the snow outside his cabin, waiting. She had come back for the child she'd almost lost. Luke closed his eyes for a moment, exhaling a long, steady breath. He had done the right thing, he knew that. And yet, as he stared at the empty spot where the bear had just been, a strange sense of loss crept in. He had spent days fighting for that tiny cub's life. He had carried it through a storm, warmed it, fed it, watched over it when its breath was barely there. And now, it was gone. Just like that. He swallowed hard and turned back toward the cabin. Inside, the heat from the fire was comforting, but the space felt emptier now. The thick blanket was still on the floor where the cub had been wrapped, the fabric slightly damp from where it had rested. The bowl he had used to warm its milk sat untouched on the counter. Everything was the same, yet everything was different. Luke moved slowly, picking up the blanket, folding it carefully as if it still held something fragile. He set it aside, running a hand through his hair, his mind still racing. He thought about that mother bear, about what it had taken for her to find him, to choose him. Had she been watching him from the moment she realized her cub was dying? Had she known where to go? Or had it been sheer desperation that had led her to step beyond the laws of the wild and trust something she should have feared? It didn't matter. She had done what she had to do, and so had he. Luke sat by the fire, stretching his aching legs, letting his body finally relax. The weight of the last few days settled over him like a heavy fog. He didn't know if he would ever see that mother bear again. He didn't know if her cub would make it, if she could keep it alive now that it was back in her care. But he hoped. And hope was more than he had started with. Morning passed into afternoon, the storm clouds clearing to reveal a bright, frozen sky. Luke spent the day repairing the woodpile outside, mending a section of the fence that had been weakened by the wind. He tried to keep busy, to push thoughts of the cub from his mind, but every time he stopped, his gaze drifted toward the tree line, waiting, listening. But there was nothing. By nightfall, he was exhausted. He stood at the doorway of his cabin, staring into the darkness, the stars stretching endlessly overhead. The silence was absolute. He sighed, stepping back inside, latching the door behind him. It was over. He climbed into bed, his body aching, his mind still restless despite the exhaustion pressing down on him. He had done everything he could. That was all that mattered. And then, just as sleep began to pull him under, a sound, faint, distant, a low, deep rumble. Luke's eyes snapped open. He sat up slowly, his heartbeat hammering against his ribs. The fire was still burning, casting flickering shadows across the cabin walls. He strained to listen, barely daring to breathe. Then, he heard it again, a soft, heavy huff. Luke swung his legs over the bed, moving cautiously toward the door. His pulse roared in his ears as he unlatched it. The cold air rushed in the moment he pulled it open. his breath caught in his throat. She was there. The mother bear stood at the edge of the clearing, her massive form illuminated by the moonlight, her dark eyes locked onto his. His entire body went still. She didn't move toward him. She didn't run. She just stood there, a silent acknowledgement, a presence that didn't need words. Luke exhaled slowly, gripping the door frame, his fingers digging into the wood. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, a man and a bear, bound by something neither of them could explain. And then, just as silently as she had come, she turned and disappeared into the night. The memory of the mother bear standing in the moonlight stayed with Luke long after she disappeared into the trees. He remained in the doorway for what felt like hours, the cold creeping into his skin, but he didn't care. His breath hung in the air, slow and steady, his heartbeat finally beginning to calm. She had come back, not for the cub this time, but for him. What had it meant? Was it gratitude, recognition, or had she simply wanted to confirm that the man she had trusted had done what she had hoped? Luke didn't know, but in his gut he felt it. She had come to say goodbye. Closing the door softly behind him, he walked back inside the cabin. Everything looked the same, but it felt different. The fire still flickered in the hearth, casting a golden glow against the walls. The blanket where the cub had once lain was folded neatly on the chair. The air was warm, but an emptiness lingered, a space where something had been. He ran a hand over his face, exhaustion finally settling in. His body ached, his mind heavy with the weight of the last few days. Dropping onto the couch, he let his head rest against the back, eyes drifting shut. But sleep didn't come easily. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw them, the cub's fragile body, barely holding on, the mother bear's desperate, pleading gaze, the way she had stood there in silence, watching him, trusting him. He had never expected to feel this way. Luke had spent most of his life alone out here in the wild, where the only laws were those of survival. He had seen life and death in its rawest forms and had come to understand that nature was cruel, indifferent, merciless. But this was something else. This was proof that there was more to the wild than just survival. It was love, a mother's love, and he had been a part of it. The days passed. The snowstorms faded into calmer skies, the sun stretching longer across the horizon. Luke kept himself busy, returning to his routines, hunting, fishing, repairing what the winter had taken. But something had changed inside him, a shift so subtle yet so undeniable that he couldn't ignore it. He found himself watching the tree line more often, listening, waiting. But she never returned. The tracks around his cabin vanished with time, erased by fresh snowfalls and shifting winds. He hadn't expected her to come back, not really. She had done what she needed to do, and so had he. But still, a part of him hoped. Then, weeks later, something happened. It was early morning when he spotted them, far in the distance at the edge of the valley. A dark shape moved through the trees. His breath caught, hands stilling where he had been chopping wood. He squinted, the sun casting long shadows over the snow, and for a moment, he thought it was just another bear passing through. But then a smaller figure followed. Luke's chest tightened. The cub, it was bigger now, stronger, moving with more confidence. Its small paws left imprints in the snow. The mother bear led the way, her massive frame powerful and steady. She didn't stop. She didn't turn back, but she had come close enough for him to see, to know they were alive. They had made it. Luke let out a slow breath, a strange tightness in his throat. He watched them until they disappeared beyond the hills, their tracks carving a path through the untouched snow. He didn't need her to stop. He didn't need her to look back, because somehow he already knew she remembered. And so would he, for the rest of his life. Some moments in life change us forever. Luke didn't set out to save a bear cub. He didn't expect to be trusted by a creature that should have feared him. And he never imagined that in the middle of the freezing wilderness, a bond would form that defied every instinct of survival. But sometimes, the wild has a way of teaching us things we never expected. This wasn't just about saving a life, it was about trust, love, and the silent language that exists between all living beings. A mother's love knows no boundaries, no fears, no hesitation. She risked everything for her cub, and in the end, she trusted a man she had no reason to trust. And that is what makes this story unforgettable. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about the incredible world we share with these animals, please take a moment to support our channel. Like this video to help share this incredible moment with more people. Subscribe for more powerful real-life stories of courage and connection. Comment below, what would you have done in Luke's place? Would you have trusted the mother bear? And most importantly, share this story with someone who needs to see it, because the world needs more reminders that love, trust, and compassion exist even in the most unexpected places. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.